and welcome. Thank you so much to ALPS, the conference organizers, and especially to our session shepherd, Lou Peck, who's been fabulous throughout this conference. And I want to welcome this wonderful panel. We're hoping to end things with a bang. We have wonderful people with lots of opinions to kind of close out this day. The framing here, our goal is really to offer not a summary, but really a fitting conclusion to a meeting that has been full of discussion. And we want that discussion to continue, not just on this stage now, but in the weeks and months to come. So hopefully we'll kind of stimulate some debate, both with our own questions and then questions from the audience. So we're going to kick things off with some questions for one another, but really please be thinking about things that you want to ask this wonderful panel, both about the conference from the last 3 days, but also perhaps what do these industry leaders see for the months ahead. So Jake, I'm going to start with you. It's your first ALPSP. You gave a wonderful keynote, which I think was a highlight of the conference for many people. And you were full of complimentary things to say about our community. But now you've spent a few days with us. You've been to the quiz. You've perhaps imbibed with us.
Yes.
So do you still have the same positivity for this community and hope for what we have to face ahead?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's such an honor again to be here. First of all, I thought the quiz last night was going to be something simple like, you know, what is the capital of this? But they were like, listen to this song, who is the composer? And I was like, composer? But I'm just really blown away by something really significant because in my practice and my work, I've engaged in different industries. There's just so much humanity here. And I think it's very genuine. I don't know about whatever, I don't know what is going on in terms of people say, oh, but people don't agree. I was like, where's the disagreement? Everyone here seems to understand where each person is coming from. Even where there's some form of disagreement, there's understanding about it. And I think there's this sense of recognizing everyone's intrinsic self-worth. I don't know if it's deliberate. I don't know if when ALP started, they were like, this is the mantra, or this is the modus operandi for how we're going to engage, but it's very apparent, and it's very unique. It's also very rare in the day and time that we are. So I think it's important to sort of recognize that. The other thing I'm just learning so much is how this is a publishing network, but there's solutions to so many things beyond publishing. Talking to John yesterday about like some very critical issue around copyright, and I'm like, you're an educator, how did you figure this out? Emma too, talking about some of the challenges and the solutions in terms of open infrastructure, and I'm like, wait a minute, these are not just publishers, these oi polloi, you know, high-level people. These are scientists, these are researchers, these are people who came into this industry because they wanted to solve a problem. And I'm really blown away by that. The other thing I would say is, for me, as a writer, author, researcher, academic, there's so much I did not know about the publishing industry. So much. And I don't know if it's deliberate, like just everyone talking to each other within, but there's a lot that people would be interested in learning about what is going on in this room, what is happening in this room. And so even talking to James yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, it's really amazing how much work needs to be done to share what is going on here. But I honestly have zero critique, and I'm not saying this because I'm here. I have learned so much, and I can't wait to tell other people in other spaces to embody and exemplify what you have here and what is working. So thank you so much for the honor, and it's been such a great experience so far.
Well, I don't know about you all, but I think that Jake should do the PR for the scholarly publishing industry in general.
The whole industry.
Because that's the best description of everything we do, so thank you for that. Now, the rest of you, you know, people that have been more worn down by many years with this community, what were your takeaways, key things that you took away from this conference?
Well, I don't know about worn down, because I genuinely feel that coming here is a way of getting not worn down. And so, okay, for me, AI and RI, if we want to live by acronyms, they were definitely the common themes that have been running through and will be with us for some time to come. But the thing that really struck me, actually, is there's a lot of complexity in what we do, right? So there's a session yesterday on Open where we were talking about the complexity of models, and some people are finding single solutions, whether to subscribe to Open or particular models. But the fundamental point there is that it's really complicated and there's not a one-size-fits-all. I think we saw that reflected again when we were talking about the drivers and research integrity and what's going on there. So there's an awful lot, and sometimes you can feel that we get really lost in that because there aren't any simple solutions. However, what I've really enjoyed is that there are some really simple things you can take away. And the two things for me, there was one yesterday, and I saw it in the quick fire session, which was effectively food labelling on journals. I love it. Now, I've got no idea whether that's a good idea or not, actually, and whether we could implement that across our programme. And I've got a feeling I may have some editorial colleagues quaking as I'm saying this, saying, Tim, please don't say that. But it's a really nice and simple idea. And there was another one just this morning on impact, and it's just, if every submission statement had the, and why did you do this work? That could actually take us somewhere for impact. So that those really little, simple, practical things you can take away is why I'm not worn down. I'm uplifted.
Love it. Wendy, thoughts about the week?
So I think I traveled through a journey. There was one part in the keynote that I found from Jake that was very inspiring, representing humanists, and that is, it's the time for humanities to shine, right? And we don't hear that often, so I was like, that's absolutely right. I'm gonna get that in a quote, I'm gonna publish it everywhere, it's gonna be amazing. Then Jake continued, and when he went towards the statistics about how much of the world still does not have access to the technology needed to take advantage of much of the work that we do, that sort of set my thinking down a different path for the rest of the conference, because all of the conversations around the models, the AI, all of this, I'm like, okay, but it's still only solving part of this issue, which led me to the point that you did not this year hear DEI woven into the conversation as much. And in a few different conversations I had with participants here, it was sort of the sentiment of, well, we're now weaving it into everything we do, but tracking back to Jake's comment, are we, if this much of the population doesn't even have access to what we do? And finally, you can see it's a very long journey that I take in my head through these things. And finally, I went thinking about that we did not get into the conversation deeply about infrastructure. And we'll talk about that we need collaboration, we need community, we need all of these things. And that's nice to talk about it, but we do need that infrastructure for both many of the reasons Jake pointed out and for many of the aspirations I think we all share here.
And Sven?
Well, I wouldn't be German if I wouldn't find a problem, right? So I guess that sets us apart. So what I found interesting is that there is this big white elephant in the room, and I felt it hasn't really been addressed. We have been talking about a lot of innovative ideas, which obviously I like because I'm working in this space as well. But a lot of our colleagues have lost their jobs over the last 2 years. And obviously we have another problem than innovation only. We also have a cost problem. This industry is not growing since years, as we know from Delta, I think, and others over the last years. So, so what do we do about that? And how do we approach that? And is this innovation that we are talking about really solving the core problems of this industry, which is returning to growth so that we can offset rising cost? That is something where, if you see this as a business and not as a societal activity, what we are doing here, that is something that I think we should be focusing on, and maybe we can now, or at the next coffee break or whatever. But that's an element which I was, when I was thinking about criticizing something, which I was finding.
And aren't those things, though, that can and perhaps should work together? You said, well, there's the societal purpose, and then there's also growth. I mean, if we're getting things right, if the structures we have in place, the infrastructure, the collaborations, if those are working optimally, shouldn't we be able to achieve both of those aims?
Me? Yeah. Well, I think so, right? I mean, ideally, you innovate in areas where you have an issue, and that means solving the issue, and then you are without issues and can grow again as an industry. I'm not sure whether we are there already, and I don't want to be all doomy and say this industry is not working or whatever, because that is not true, right? We know that. It is a successful industry in many financial and other ways. But still, I find it a little bit disappointing that after decades of growth in academic publishing, we haven't seen that over the last years. And I think publishers big and small, by the way, and I think that's something that we should invest more mental capacity on, and also deploy more technology to not just think about the next step of efficiency improvements, which, don't get me wrong, are all important, but also how do we grow further? How do we manage to unlock that growth that the first wave of the internet in the early 2000s has brought to many industries, including ours? How can we unlock that new wave through AI or whatever kind of technologies? I'm agnostic to technologies, frankly, as long as they do what they are meant to do, which is great and grow.
Can I come back on you a bit there, Sven? I'm not quite understanding. On the one hand, it sounds like you're saying that there's too much innovation, or there's lots of talk about innovation. On the other hand, it's that there's about to go. But in my mind, isn't it? That's what the innovation does, right? So what's the problem that you're highlighting here? Because if there's lots of focus on innovation, albeit we're certainly in a massive time of change, of that there is no doubt. But surely that innovation is the very thing that gives us the future growth, sustainability, the way forward.
I see so far that innovation is very much inward-looking. It is optimizing our processes. It is fixing issues around peer review, for example, finding peer reviewers, workflow issues, and so on. Issues that we have been seeing over a decade or two. So they are all not new, these problems, right? They have been escalating to a point where we as an industry needed to respond, and I think that's where we are right now. And now innovators are coming in and offering solutions, and that's great. But does that really spur growth? I don't know. I don't see it.
I believe it was Oxford that made the point yesterday, though, that this investment that they need to do in the next 2 years is at a loss, right? Mm-hmm. But that is the foundation that they want to establish to be able to do innovation in the future. Some of those workflows, like, they're not sexy, right? Like, no one wants to really talk about workflows. But that investment and that realization that we've been at a, I guess, innovation investment deficit, if it's come to this head, is just like, lesson learned, move forward, don't do it again.
Do you feel that we're at this kind of precipice where we do need to be setting a foundation for the future? That there's a lot of things that are kind of nascent, whether it's AI or, you know, we're seeing a lot of potential future consolidation, that the industry is best served to take a beat, to invest, and it will pay dividends tomorrow? Or should we be doing more right now? What are the thoughts?
I mean, this is my, first experience. One thing I recognized from the licensing discussion yesterday is the fact that this industry has the most robust legal frameworks around intellectual property IP protection, and it's because of the scholarly acumen that goes into these things. So there's a lot of high-level thinking that happens here, but we must recognize that this association is very much at the very front of a discussion around the technology that is still being developed. I mean, OpenAI just released a new model, I think last night or 2 days ago, about some new model that can help solve mathematics in a more complex field. So when I did my PhD, I was looking at the impact of AI on marginalized communities across sub-Saharan Africa. And one thing I realized as a product of that PhD, even when I advised the Nigerian government or the Brazilian government, is that AI would have an impact on so many aspects of the human endeavor, but we still have a choice to decide if and how we want to engage with it. If people in this community believe that there might be job displacement, it is okay to say, well, being a scholarly, being a society group, we are deciding that we would assure our members that their jobs would be held protected until and when people feel comfortable to say, okay, well, I've transitioned into something else. So if you look at the mining industry in South Africa or in Kenya or in Nigeria, there are tools developed in Germany that could just displace 100,000 people the next very day. But the government's like, well, we don't want that. We want to use technology to serve us and not the other way around. This is something, again, I'm not very religious, but the Pope Francis wrote a book called The Evangelii Gaudium when he says, and he's very big on AI. He's like, he doesn't understand AI, but it must serve humanity and not be ruled by it. So there is a lot of power here to say, well, we have decided that we would protect the jobs and what we know that is working. We will innovate, and we will not allow innovators come in. These are the innovators. What are you talking about? You were supposed to be going out there to Silicon Valley and say, well, let me tell you what I know about my 20 years in the industry. This is what you should be looking at. Leave this alone. That's none of your business. Focus on helping us with this. Focus on helping us with that. And if you can't do that, then it's fine. We're not going to complain. But I guess the narrative from the industry is like, if you're not innovating, you're going to lose. Like there's this, but no, it's not possible. We've seen it from the internet era. We've seen it so many times. And, you know, this is a community that serves a lot of people outside the scope of your own understanding. So it's interesting. For me, when I think of innovation, all I've heard from the beginning of this conference to now is just innovation, 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 innovation. Like my notepad is full. I'm like, why don't we have journals for children? Why were there no journals? Like, why can't kids be peer reviewers? Like, yeah. And I'm even thinking, like, an AI can never be a peer reviewer. It's not a peer, but a peer reviewer can use an AI. So it's like, my notes is full, and I'm like, this is you have the innovation. Trust me, they don't have it. They might have, again, going back to a session yesterday on AI, I think it was Lou's session, yeah, where they were talking about the difference between skill and task. You knowing how to use technology, it's not necessarily might be a skill. It can be like you know how to do something, you understand computing and all, but it's not a skill. Skill is very scholarly. It's about understanding human relations, understanding the impact of technology, even understanding that this tool might be biased. It takes a skill to know that this output looks good, but there's just something wrong about it. So I'm not trying to like just praise and praise, but for me as a writer, scholar, you are the ones I look up to accredit my work. Like I'm really looking up to you to have solutions for me and not to be like, well, we're worried about how this might affect us. We're worried about, you're the one to chart the course and you should do that very strongly so.
I think you bring up a really good point, too, about that some of this is about language and that we do like to kind of talk a big game about we're innovating, we're innovating, we're innovating, but are we, to kind of, you know, Tim and Wendy's earlier point, are we executing? Are we putting practical solutions in place? Or should we do that now? Or should we be doing, you know, to your point in your keynote, should we be calming down and kind of taking the landscape and seeing what's going to have the most efficacy? So, I mean, personally, I do think this is a place where we can be stronger, which is really what are the practical solutions, and what are the practical solutions, not just for large commercial organizations, but for small humanity publishers, for not-for-profit societies. What are the actual practical steps? And that certainly has been something that has lacked in the past in our discussions about open access. And I think we're at risk of following the same course when we're talking about AI. A lot of the societies, it's like, what are you doing with AI? Or what are the Bio One societies doing with AI? Well, they don't really know where to begin. They're not really sure what that means for them. And so what are we doing to make that relevant for them? And to your point, make that useful to fit the cause?
Yeah, if I could build on that, I think, this is my view of this, and innovation generally actually, is that there is a risk sometimes where we just look at the really big thing and think if we haven't done or we can't do the big thing, then we haven't done the innovation. But actually, just engaging with it, do we know where AI is going to take us as an industry, indeed as a society? No, of course we don't. But we know it's going to have a big impact. Do we know how to remove the bias from it, or indeed from ourselves as individuals? No, of course we don't, but we can take small steps. And for me, it's that if we make the decision to engage, because I think we have to, and it's a positive thing too, because that's what we have always done, that's what our industry's always done. We put the knowledge at the heart of society that enables us collectively to move forward. That's the big picture piece. The small picture piece is we will publish another article. We will publish another book. We will make sure it's in the right hands. We will make it easy for people to get to. And we do that in lots and lots of small ways. Now, do we make it really easy for everybody to get the right piece of information that's right up to date in their hands at the moment and be able to prove the impact? Of course we don't. That's ridiculously hard. But we do make those little changes which make it a bit better, a bit better, a bit better, and we do make progress. That's literally how progress works. Yeah. So I think keep an eye on the big picture for sure. Definitely engage, don't deny, and let's see where we go.
And focus on that incremental progress.
Through incremental change, big change happens.
Yep, for sure.
I'll ask the panel, do you think that a lot of the mandates have promoted innovation? So there's a lot of mandates pushing for OA, there's mandates pushing for accessibility. A lot happening around accessibility is innovation, right? And so in some ways, I feel like we're not taking the credit for the ways we are innovating in very rapid ways. And it speaks to sort of the challenges of the resources we have when you are trying to fulfill all of these mandates because they're the right things to do. You've just now put a timeline on them, while also grappling with AI as the newest, shiniest tool to do something with and hopefully solve problems but create new opportunities for publishing.
It's an interesting question, one that I think that we've talked about, in various ways throughout this conference and previous conferences, is that does our industry and do our organizations respond better to the carrot or the stick? Do we need a crisis in order to change, in order to innovate? Or are we going to just naturally do the things that will bring more societal impact, that will bring revenue growth? Are these things that are going to happen organically? Or do we maybe not want to admit it, but these prods of mandates and crises, do they actually push us forward?
Yeah, so now I'm in the grumpy corner already. I'll stay there. It's very convenient over here.
Yeah. Makes sense.
No, but thank you. But two topics, and that is where I think, Tim, I would say incremental steps can be slow and fast and big and small. And I would say we clearly need the stick as an industry. Accessibility to content in Africa on different levels, and other continents, by the way. Is that a new information to anybody? That it is difficult to get physical access to information in sub-Saharan Africa? I hope not. I hope this is not new to any one of you. Accessibility, the European Accessibility Act, is that news to anybody? It's around as a discussion since 10, 15 years. I joked with a colleague from the German Publishers Association lately. I'm just waiting for the task force asking next February, before the implementation in June, whether publishers can get another 3 to 5 years to accommodate to this fast-changing environment. So I think we really and clearly need a stick in some cases, because it is no rocket science. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It is not complicated. Technologically, it just needs to be done. And that's what I meant by the internal issues that we have and the elephants in the room, probably more than one. It is a matter of priorities, right? Do we have time for these kinds of things? Is it really important enough for a large publishing organization to broaden access in sub-Saharan Africa and have a better accessibility of their technological platform, like hosting platform, or not? It is a matter of choice, and we have made other choices. It is not that there is a kind of force of nature out there that keeps us from it. And I think that's what we have to say, and that's where I would hope that we push each other a little bit more at these conferences, and also talk a little bit about more the customers and users. So I found this, in some cases, an inward-looking conversation, and that's fine for an industry conference, don't get me wrong, but I think thinking about why we are doing things, not just because we are excited about them, and we all love that stuff, we are all curious, right? But really kind of then thinking the next step and see how can we make this a usable tool.
I forget what it was regarding, but you had a great comment on LinkedIn, Sven, where you said, in reference to an article, this is a pragmatic decision and thus good. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is an industry that, by and large, is acting pragmatically, or is that something that you think we could take more of?
I think that was Springer Nature that declared all of their journals, you don't have to declare anymore if you use AI as a writing assistant, right? Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly. I think that was the point. I remember, I have to tell you a story about that. I did my PhD at a German university in 2000, and I had to sign a one-pager saying that I'm using the personal computer and the text processor only for writing texts and not doing any miracles. Otherwise, I would have needed to use a typesetter. Typewriter. Yeah. And I feel a little bit reminded in this environment where everybody comes up with their own policies. We all understand that we need to standardize, but every publisher, group, journal, editorial group, whatever, Tim knows better, everybody in these large companies comes up with their own idea about how can we use certain tools, and I think pragmatism helps. Yeah, starting simple and making it complicated when needed, but not starting complicated. That is un-German, though, so I'm not saying that is the usual way how we go about things.
Jake, now putting your kind of researcher hat on, mm-hmm. Yep. How do you respond to some of this? What are some of those perhaps quick win or pragmatic decisions that you think the people in this room, the publishers in this room, could do that would make kind of quick win change for the research community?
I think a quick win would be, like I talked about, like a general statement around where we are at. This is what we're thinking. This is what we've been discussing here. Because every single panel, there's a conversation around AI. And I think the industry, the tech industry, the developers, would need to sort of know or learn from, this is what the industry is talking about. These are their concerns. These are where they think innovation would be important. These are some of the fears, just so that there's a conversation with the industry, because like Tim said, the AI would obviously have an impact. So that dialogue has to happen.
More transparency.
Yeah, more transparency. And then talking about transparency, I think it's okay if people say you don't have to declare if you use AI, but it's also okay if people declare, because we're still at the very nascent stage. When I was in university, we didn't have internet. There was internet in Nigeria, but it was only a very few people that had it. So our teachers would say, if you use internet for your homework, please disclose, because they're not going to grade you the same way they'll grade someone without internet. Same thing with calculators in the 60s. Mathematicians protested the use of calculators, because if you use your head to calculate and someone punched it in, we need to know, because we know the skill set, the time is different. Right now, there's a lot of conversation in the legal space around watermarking, because we're at a point where people can't really tell, is this AI, is it not? We haven't developed that up to the point. So in the future, it would be like, come on, everyone uses it, you don't need to declare. But right now, it's important to know, just so that we're able to tell, okay, the black box problem, which AI did you use? What did you use it for? Spell check, did it generate the information, so that we know if it's hallucinating or if it's just you making the error. I think this conversation is important. There's no direct answer to it, but I think we're in the mix and match moment. We'll all get to the point where it's a bit fine and more defined.
I think that's something we can all take a page from, is this idea that this has been a wonderful conference. Many of the conferences that we all attend have great conversations, but you're right that it's very insular. And that what we can do, there's obviously things that we can't share more broadly, but there is a lot that we can. And having, to industry, to libraries, to the customer, to the user, having more discussions of, we don't have all the answers right now, but here are the things we're working on, here are the things we're thinking about, probably could go a long way in building trust.
Yes, and telling the government too, we want you to transform the copyright laws, this is what we want. We want research to be a category, these are the gaps that you have, and be bold about it. Make it clear, this is what you want, because the government looks up to the scholarly industry. The publishing is literally prime when it comes to this. So authors want to be sure that you know about their issues in this age of AI. You can tell the government what you want. You can tell, this is what we want you to take this into consideration, and they will. So like you said, the in-conversation needs to go out.
I want to shift for just a second, just a lot of talk about AI, which is natural. As you said, Wendy, it's the shiny new thing. But coming back to something I know close to your heart and things you're working on, Project Muse and Johns Hopkins University Press is working on, what did you think about the discussions about OA at this meeting? And especially this meeting versus perhaps last year's, when the program was full of things on open access, and it seems like we've now had a shift.
We have, and so for full disclosure, at Muse, we are in the process of trying to launch an S2O program, and a lot of the conversation yesterday was around S2O. What I love about S2O in general, not about the model necessarily, is actually it's the one model that I have seen an organic community grow around the S2O community of practice, which is that space we talk about all the time, like we need collaboration, we need this, and it's been lovely. Like, it's been amazing that people are willing to share, come up with solutions, everybody's sort of working collaboratively to the same goal, because the better behaved you are in S2O, it helps all of us. If you misbehave in S2O, it doesn't. But what I liked was a little bit of a shift in that conversation where we're always looking for, or I feel like we're always looking for, the one magic model that's going to solve it all. And, and everybody gets their turn with that, right? And you've got, at least 18 months of a conference road trip on that one. But it was nuanced, but yesterday's conversation shifted a little bit to, there isn't going to be the magic solution to this, that we are all going to have to support these many different models, and that sort of this realization about how much that's really going to cost. And I know, again, this is workflows. Workflows are not sexy, but even something like Muse, that's, a lot of smaller publishers, a lot of smaller nonprofit publishers, we've spent, over $500,000 just getting to the point of launching S2L, just to do all of the fine feasibility work that one needs to do. And, if it doesn't, I'll just use us as a case study. If it doesn't work for us, when our model is we're already giving back 75% of our revenues to publishers, so we're not keeping a whole lot back to be able to reinvest. What does that mean if it doesn't work for us and that it's under-supported by the community? So I got a little bit nervous. So I'm talking on both sides. I like the realism of that's the way it's going to have to be, but then I went into, when I go back to work on Monday, how do I do that, right? And how do I do that on the heels of everything else we're talking about with the innovation around AI, making it to those accessibility requirements, and all of those things that, is part of my job to support those smaller publishers. They cannot do it on their own. I know, Sven, you said, these things are easy enough to do for accessibility and things like that. And I just have to counter that a little bit because I've been in enough two-people offices doing really important work that don't have a minute more. And if they get, $1,000 less in revenue, it's a person and now it's 1.5 people in that office. So I have to point that out on the other end of the scale.
I really agree with that. On the scale point, in fact, let me come back to scale point. I think in the multiplicity of model, I completely agree. There's much more nuance, and there will be multiple models forever, I suspect. We live in a very diverse world, and there is a diverse model response to making sure that everybody can both produce and consume equitably. With diversity of model comes proliferation of cost. It just does. It just does, and that's a fact, and we have to manage that. So when if you, in simple terms, when there's a simple one-stop subscription model, you could have one system that both produced and disseminated the content and collected the money and distributed the cost associated with it. Every time you multiply it, there are more systems, therefore there's more cost. That's just a fact. The second point, I think, on you were talking about priorities, and of course that's true, and it's painfully true for small organisations. I've worked in organisations both small and large, and those choices have to be made in large organisations too. There's not just some kind of magic resource pot that is infinite and can do everything. So everywhere, one has to take choices. And so then it comes back to how do you make those choices, which feeds into, is it done by regulation? Do we decide by ourselves? Do we decide as an industry? So I think, and unsurprisingly, and there isn't a magic solution to that either, but I think multiplicity, for sure, increased cost, that's a fact of life. We have to therefore make decisions.
Yeah. And I think, Wendy, to your comment about what does this cost to try, I think it's also important to what does it cost to not try? And that's true in your case, it's certainly true in the Bio1 case, but I think it's a lesson for all of us as well about if we stay too stagnant, if we calm down for too long, these things might pass us by. And understanding that there's a multiplicity of models, understanding that there are probably solutions. I feel this way certainly about open access. Are there wonderful models that we're working with now? Yes. Are there wonderful models yet to be discovered, yet to be tested and analyzed? Of course. We were not talking about subscribe to open 5-7 years ago. There's probably going to be a next wave of a model that hopefully is equitable, is sustainable, and will take care of more societies within those multiplicity of models in the future. And so keeping our kind of collective foot on the gas to make sure, or the petrol, sorry, that we continue to seek those solutions, I think is really important. So thinking again now about, and then I want to go to our audience who hopefully has lots of good comments and questions off of this, just one final one from me to you all of what do you see for the year ahead? Kind of a big question, but more of thinking about ALPS 2025 when we are perhaps sitting on this stage. What will we be talking more about, less about? Will it be the same items? What do you see shifting perhaps in the year ahead?
I find it interesting that right now we are discussing AI very much focused based on artifacts, on articles which are already, that have been published afterwards. I'm curious to see what will happen in terms of other media types and also what will be happening about the research process itself. So how does digitization really change the collaboration or the process for the researcher between bench and article, and how much will we really produce? So I remember a few years ago when we discussed semantic search, for example, 10 years ago or so ago, at large at these conferences, there was this idea of we need to prepare content better to get the full potential basically out of semantic search. I assume and I understand from people who know better than I do, the technology side, that this is also true for AI. So how can we help researchers to instill the most of information into whatever it is, a text or whatever, and graphs and so on, to really use that or to create the biggest benefit for the user of the research output?
Go ahead.
Well, I think Lauren hinted to it in one of her earlier questions. I think we're going to need to see more organizations merge, join forces, whether that's through shared infrastructure, whether that's through formal agreements, whatever that is, because the redundancy and the amount of resources we're all using to solve the same problem, to get to the same place most often. And as you mentioned, the cost of publishing is getting more and more expensive as the revenues are not staying flat, if you're lucky. And so that I think is going to be a big shift that we're going to see in the next couple of years. We're not going to be able to have so many smaller independent organizations. We're going to need the strength and the scale of some collaboration, and probably a little bit more formally than just having a coffee at a break and saying we should do this together. Something a little bit more strategic than that.
You can go.
Thank you. Yeah, I think building on both those points, for me, it is the potential that we've always had since we digitalized of the atomization of content to be repurposed in new ways. And that, I think, is partly what you were hinting to there, Sven, in terms of what AI can bring. I think as a general purpose technology, AI actually gives us the ability to do what we've talked about for a long time. How many of us sat in a session that is entitled something like Beyond the Journal, The Death of the Journal, Books Are Dead, whatever, ad infinitum? We can now do that. We can now actually do that. And there's loads of debate around at the moment, of course, about the licensing and the training of the models and all of those things. But when we digitalized the print versions, we took them flat and we put them online in a digital format. We then broke them down and did all of the metadata work. And this is what I mean about this kind of incremental progress. We then broke them down into those different units, but it was still really hard to find them and put them back together in the same way and restricted. But all of the pain we're going through now and the debates we're having about licensing, how we do it, will allow us to take all these different units, put them back together and repurpose them to new audiences in different ways. And that's what we've always been trying to do. And I really, really hope that come next year, we're going to have some case studies about small incremental changes that are showing that thing. Because when we then look back in 5 years' time, in ALPS 2029, please let me say I've got that maths right, where we can say, you know what, something proper big has changed here.
I think that's a great challenge to this community too, to start thinking about the very interesting things that all of your organizations are doing, and that what can be shared from that, what can be shared in case studies, in conversation, in best practice, both within this community and outside of it. I think that's a great call to arms for the future. And I wanted you to go last so that we get this very, again, positive message for what we see for the year ahead.
I don't have any positive message, but just to build up on that, I think people fear what they don't know, and it's normal. I think next year when there's a gathering, there'll be less fear. I think there will be some case study or evidence within the publishing cycle where AI has been used and it worked. So I would like to see there'll be presentations around, okay, look at what we did with AI here. Didn't really do much for us, so we kind of abandoned this. And then there'll be more, there'll be a knowledge sharing around what AI even really is. To be honest with you, some of it is not what you think it is. Some might just be, some restructuring of some statistical model that works in this area. But more importantly, disruption brings people together. And so maybe some of the things you think were issues within the industry will no longer be issues anymore, there will be more collaborative, more collaborative avenues. But the thing is, there would also be dissipation of a lot of noise, because I remember when COVID happened, they were like, if you're not teaching in the metaverse, you're not really like, and I was like, oh my God, what is the metaverse? How do I teach in the metaverse? I don't think anyone talks about the metaverse anyway. So I think there will be more delineation around what is important and what is not. And I actually think a lot of people here are going to change jobs into the Silicon Valley. And no, really, like, some of you need to be consultants there because they will need to know how to engage with the industry, and you point them to, if you do this, you're going to kill it. You make that million right here. Come, come, come. You have the network here. You know the people here. You go there, be the consultant, charge them great. They have money. Charge them. And I think that would be a good bridge to collaborate. But to be honest with you, this has been such a beautiful experience. I don't know what you guys are eating, drinking, but...
Gin.
It's Lou. Lou's the one. Yeah, but thank you. I've had such a really amazing time.
Oh, this is wonderful. Okay, I hope you all have questions. Oh, come on. So much. You've got these wonderful industry leaders with the sharing of these candid thoughts. Oh, great.
Hi, so I'm Lizzie Brophy. I'm a publisher at Sage. And you've kind of mentioned, you know, that the importance of innovation, change, disruption, uncertainty for the future, and what a big role that's playing. And, you know, we're thinking of all these very high-level ideas and roadmaps and et cetera. But when it comes down to it, most of the people in this room are not going to be the people who are going to be communicating, talking, persuading the societies, the editors, the authors to actually go along with this. That's going to be the journal managers or whatever job title you call it in your publishing house. You know, they're the people who are going to be having to turn these ideas into a reality, and whose job it is to bring, you know, the clients on that journey with us. So I guess I'm wondering, like, what kind of support, infrastructure change, or do you think that we're going to need to help do that? Because without those people, we're not going to achieve any of this.
It's a great question. Do you want to take that, Wendy?
Sure. And I'm sorry that I'm going to use S2O again, but it's a big part of my life right now. And I can say, while approaching hundreds of publishers, the onus and a lot of that investment I talked about earlier was actually supporting, having those conversations with each one of our publishers, and then being willing to have conversations with each one of their editors, and developing the tools and the information that made sort of the conversations and things easier. But it was our job to figure that out, and that's part of the investment to it. And something like S2O in the university press publishing world was wild and unaccepted. So this was not a program that was like instantly, humanities journals were like, I want to be OA. We had more support and, I'll say, a little bit of pressure from the library market to go in that direction and convince our publishers that this is the way to go. But really, it was on us, right? Like, we had to create all those tools so that they would be persuasive, because if we didn't have those publishers' hearts and minds in what we were doing, they certainly weren't going to convince their editors. So I know that's a real soft answer, but it really was like sitting in the room and listening and having the conversations.
I think we can probably learn a lot here from two things that at least I saw in my work over the last 15 years or so. One is OA for both journals, but even more so for books, I would say. The other one is print on demand. One topic is a little bit more sexy, that is open access, also for authors, because there's a clear benefit in that for them. And the other one is a little bit less sexy, because the benefit is primarily there for the publisher, I would say, on the cost side. But I'm completely with you, Tim, here. It needs leadership and it needs decisions in publishing houses. And I think that is the biggest challenge that we all have right now, to make sure that in this uncertainty and with so many innovations going on there, we spoke about it in the coffee break, if you look at how many peer review AI assistants have been launched or are to be launched in the last and next 2 weeks, it's really difficult to make decisions, right? But that is in the end the job not only of managers, but I think for everybody in a publishing house. And then I think it's really about bringing that knowledge, as you said earlier, bringing that knowledge and experience that we have in a generally understandable way to those audiences. Because I think in most cases researchers are not following their publishers, not because they don't like them, but because they don't understand or they don't see the criticality of this. And I think we need to make sure why it's critical for them and not we are doing this because our EVP something found it really important to have this conversation now.
Yeah, no, if I could just build on that directly, I think it's a great question, because actually you can make a really clear decision and then it just gets dissipated with the where it's supposed to be delivered, right? And I think I would say two things. That's A, remember that you have to do that communication and bring people with. B, to your point, Sven, I think you have to be really clear on why you're doing it. Even if people disagree with why you're doing it, be clear on why you're doing it, because then you've got a reason. Because that takes me to the third point. So if you're really clear on why you're doing it, and the person that's working it doesn't like it, that person has a choice. And we give people the choice, and then they move on, and then the people that remain focused on it are behind it and up for it, and the people that aren't, and that's okay.
Excellent. Other questions?
Tasha Mellins-Cohen, counter and OA consultant. As an industry, we're really good at adding new things. So we've invested huge amounts in research integrity checks, and we've started doing new business models. We're really bad at stopping old things and decommissioning legacy. So I would love to know what the panel thinks we should stop doing by this time next year.
Ooh, it's a good question for discussion.
Everybody's looking at me. I was sitting there thinking, that's a good, really tough question.
Well, while you four, I'll take the pressure off for 1 second. I think one thing to go off, Wendy, your point, that this is not a specific thing, but it's a trend of, I think we need to continue to get away from the siloing of, I need my own version of this. Yeah. And that's something that we've done for a long time in terms of, certainly in terms of infrastructure, and I think we're at risk of doing it now in terms of things like approaches to AI, approaches to licensing, any number of things that we've said, well, you know, such and such an organization is doing this well, but I could do it slightly differently and put my own logo on it, and so I'm going to do it that way. But the reality is we are in a market where, as we've said many times throughout this conference, throughout this panel, revenue is not rising at the same rate of expenses. So I think we need to give up a little bit of that ego-driven behavior, and that we're going to need to collaborate more, share infrastructure, do those things that is collectively going to keep the cost down.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And because I think the stop doing it comes back to the multiplicity point. There are certain amounts of multiplicity that we just have to accept. So there are different models. I don't need to rehearse it again. So what that means is we have to stop the multiplicity where we don't need it.
Yes.
And coming back to the simple examples, I think there are some, and I can't quite remember the numbers, but we recently looked at the numbers of different reasons for rejection across our journal portfolio. And I'm not even going to start making numbers up, but there were so many different reasons that when you code it, but those 17 different codes are fundamentally the same thing. Why? And we've all been there, right? Because whenever you look at it, and if you get two different journal editors or book commissioners on the same subject, they will all have slightly different points. And I do think this comes back to the decision point about we need to be really strong on what we need to make more simple. And it basically means to be where it doesn't matter about the multiplicity, don't have it, and where it does, it does. And that's what we need to get to.
And I would even extend that what I find particularly interesting is and important is working together across companies. So reviewing a physics journal at Cambridge University Press, Oxford University Press, and Taylor and Francis. Does that merit different forms, processes, and so on? Probably not, right? So is there a difference between a physics journal and a philosophy journal? I guess we would all say yes. But why not kind of standardize, as in other industries, in the car industry, for example, the auditing processes across the different publishers. Everybody does it by themselves. but we implement standards. We are the only industry that does quality control without standards, and we believe that that merits positive results. That is not very sensual, I would say. So kind of agreeing on these standards, and as you said earlier, Wendy, I think Subscribe to Open is a great example. I would say the work that my team has done around OABLE and with CCC and others, where the industry came together to basically work together through APIs and with large publishers and standardize this and said we are competing on a commercial stage, but we are not competing about the best metadata because there is an absolute standard of what is best in certain disciplines. I think that would be great.
And I would think that standardization would certainly be a benefit to the researcher community.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is, because we don't really know what the life cycle is. No matter how hard we try, there's a lot of acronyms thrown out. I have to like Google it. Yeah, even when you say open access, I think there's different understanding even in the room around what open access is. Is it open access to scholarly work? Is it open access to infrastructure? Is it open access in terms of the subject area? Is it open access? Like the open access itself needs to be deconstructed, or maybe you allow this multiplicity of understanding around open access. So we understand that it's not a constricted construct. It is ever evolving, ever growing. It's not going to diminish, but it's going to change. And this thing happened, therefore we're rethinking open access in this way. So even when people say, oh, it's OA, and just move on, I'm like, break it down. OA what? What is open? Like access to whom? Where and how? And access to who doesn't have access to this? So open access is phenomenal. It needs to just constantly be interacted with so that it keeps developing and it meets the needs of people who find difficulty with it at the moment. The point about standards is very important. I think it's, even for me, there are some things I've learned here that I would take with me, like the last panel with Tamika, Kathleen, and Mercury. I'm like, wait a minute, I should always include in my abstract why I'm doing this research. Very important, because some people write abstracts as a summary of the work, some people write abstracts as a background before this work came to being. And it's important to actually state why. And just as liner, I'm doing this research because this has impacted me personally, or this is the experience that I have. But also, I'm amazed that people here actually do read. I didn't know people read the work like that. People were citing things. At the quiz yesterday, like, KM must be Karl Marx, it's 1940. I was like, what? I thought you guys just like, that's great, no, not that. You actually engage with literature. And people are talking, this is an academic conference. Like, I'm really impressed with not just the scholarly production, but the critical engagement. It's very hard for academics to come together to agree on certain things. But even academics at this level, the fact that you guys can still agree on things and still like, well, we'll pack that and come back to it later, but you're moving on really fast. I've been in settings where 7 years we're discussing just committee, like what should we call it? We can't call it this. We'll come back next year. So I like, celebrate the pace that you're going, celebrate that you don't have knowledge about everything, celebrate that the scholarly work doesn't start and end with you. Just celebrate these things, because even for me, the things I've learned here that I'll take to my work, I'm sure some of you will learn it in other spaces as well. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, it's wonderful. Perfect. Again, you're making us feel very hopeful and positive about the things we're doing. I think we have a question from online.
We do. We actually have 3. Oh, I'm losing my voice.
Okay.
And Godwin's and I added 2 in, so anyway. Because we were, wanted to make sure there was a question. Okay, so we've got one from Jane Charlton, and it is, where's it gone? Okay. Oh, hello, where has it gone? Oh, I said it's been answered. Thank you. Godwin's. God, Godwin's should be doing this. Right. Could issues with industry growth correlate to the points made in today's earlier session around the purpose, the why, impact of research, and bias towards English language journals?
Ooh.
You can choose, Lauren, who to answer that question.
So maybe put this way, Sven. So we need revenue growth. This is one of our major drivers that we need to be exploring. How do you see that coming about? What are things we should be exploring to pursue that?
Well, and that's exactly the direction I'm thinking into. So I would say if an industry is not growing in revenue, then the services it provides are not being bought by more people, or the price increases can't be realized in the market, right? That is, I guess, the, the stupid business explanation to it. I guess we operate under specific conditions in a largely more or less publicly funded environment or corporate funded environment and so on. So it is not a kind of consumer market in that respect that we can take every piece of evidence back and make decisions based on that. But I would assume, so let me turn that into one example, which we discussed a few days ago in a workshop about AI as well. And the idea was, so what happens if articles are being fragmented into answers to prompts? Journal brands will disappear, right? It's not that important anymore whether this piece of evidence came from that journal or the other. It is just important whether it is right, whatever that is, or not. But at the same time, journal brands and where you publish will remain important, so far at least, for researchers that publish, because it's part of their research evaluation and so on. Now, can publishers create services, or can anybody, vendors, create services that help researchers in that job? So can we, for example, say, Jake is not just writing articles on what he's doing research in, he's also sitting on stages at a conference in Manchester and sharing his information and knowledge and so on, and that is important, and he speaks on public television and God knows what. All these things, everything that you need today as a researcher in research evaluation, like beyond your specific project. I think that can work, because that's what many of us do with LinkedIn and other platforms already, right, that they create a digital persona of themselves or somebody else creates them. But I think that is really important, and I can imagine that that would lead to growth, and that would also be a service that would be bought and in that respect increase revenue. So long-winded answer to a very simple question. I would say it is important to not give up on growth. I mean, we can't do that. We can't just say it's over, let's make a few acquisitions here and there that increases our market share, but the industry as a whole is not growing. That's not good.
Excellent. Probably have time for one more.
Oh, because we've got more coming in. Really? Okay. Oh God, am I going to have to...
I don't want to be the one that keeps everyone from lunch and trains, but we can try.
Okay. So just going on... actually aligned to what Sven was talking about. Why do we continue to force readers to digest research literature as PDF and HTML, as it's all just metadata? What ideas do the panels have to present this research differently beyond video abstracts and lay summaries?
I'll pick that one up if you like. I mean, it kind of builds back on the comments I was making a few minutes ago, is that I think that we are on the cusp of having the technological capability to do all of those things. And we talk about beyond lay summaries and video abstracts. We haven't even scratched the surface of that. If we could just nail, we call them plain language summaries. I'd turn the P into from plain to professional language summaries. And what I mean by that is we have a summary that is relevant to the audience that you want to get it to. Be it a policymaker, be it a student, be it a zoologist, whatever it is. And if we use the technology to do that, we will transform the access, because it will just be used in lots of different ways by society, and then we'll work out how to count the impact of it, and then we'll work out what the value is, and then we'll work out that there'll be a service that someone, because you're going to have to be able to charge for it in some shape or form, because you've got to be able to fund the development of the technology. But those things will follow through. So rather than going beyond those things, let's just nail those. If we could nail those two things, job done.
I think that really connects nicely to focus on the beyond the brand, beyond the journal, beyond even the article, there is the why. And if we can get to that point of why is this research important? What is this research going to mean to the general public, to other research being done? As you say, that's really at the crux of this, beyond format. Okay, maybe one more.
Okay. Oh God, my phone's just gone off. Bear with me. Okay. 7 hinted on the choices we make. Oh, Sven.
So we can call you 7.
Trust me.
Trust me, it says 7. Must have been your predictive text. And as you're sitting... What?
That was not the plan. But anyway, Sven, apologies. I actually noticed it's autocorrect, AI, right? Well, so Sven, you hinted on the choices that we make, considering things like diversity and access. So my question is then, what do the panel, not just you, think could influence these decisions, and how can decision makers be encouraged to make better decisions that put the diverse needs that are there into consideration?
Look at me again, fair enough.
Well, you're at the end. We had the natural.
Well, I think the first point is actually we do work within effectively a semi-regulated environment, right? Because a lot of what we do is driven by mandates. So some of it is about what the policy says, and we just have to follow it. And that's okay. Sometimes you agree with it, sometimes you don't. So I think to the how can we make better choices, it's about, again, being clear about what the choices are and that there are trade-offs. So the two things I would say is, firstly, if we are really clear about what things are mandates and policy, and therefore we must and therefore we follow. And the second point I would say is around when we're making choices for ourselves internally, again, if we can be transparent around the reasons why we're making the decision. So are we putting accessibility as the key thing that we're driving at? Are we talking about that something must be open? In other, what's our internal policy, if you like? So it's the external policy, the internal policy, and be transparent about those two things.
Final quick words from the others?
Maybe in the lunch break.
Wonderful. Well, this has been tremendous. Thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you to this tremendous panel. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Morning, everyone. It's still morning. Maybe it's afternoon now. Maybe it's afternoon. So I'm here to formally close the conference. But first, just a big thank you to the panel. I found that to be such a thoughtful and inspiring sort of reflection on the last few days and the future challenges. And it's given us some really nice pointers for next year's conference. So thank you so much. Well, hopefully you've all enjoyed the conference as much as I have. I've had a fantastic time. And I've been really taken aback, really, by the number of people who've come up to me over the last few days and said, what a wonderful atmosphere there is here. This is a great community. Everyone's so supportive and welcoming. And that's down to everyone in this room. That's sort of what you are doing, what we are doing together with this community here. And there was some talk about how we should work together the more. And we are in such a great position to do that because we have all the structures around us and we know each other very well and we welcome new people. So thank you for that. The ALPS community, I've been involved in the ALPS community for years and it's just going from strength to strength, so thank you. It's been a good conference. We've had just over 280 people at the conference from 22 countries. We're a diverse organisation, we're a diverse community, and we can, build strengths. There's still more we can do, but we can build on this, and that's where our strength comes from. I do have one of the privileges, I think I mentioned my privileges last night. One of my privileges is to thank, on our behalf, all the people who've been helping with the conference. I'm first going to just remind everyone of all the winners of the awards yesterday that were announced. And maybe you could join me in showing our sort of congratulations and well dones. So I'll just run through them quickly. So we had the ALPS Award for the contribution to scholarly publishing. The winner was David Warlock. The ALPS Award for innovation in publishing was the Paper Mill Alarm. The ALPS Impact Award went to JSTOR, Access in Prison. And highly commended was the Forest of Biologists. And our Rising Star Awards went to Ella Gibbs, Hazel Rowland, Anna Savage, Heather Townsend, and Melody Jang. So let's just thank them. And maybe a good well done as well to the people who did well in the quiz last night as well. So the winners were, and I've got to get this right, AIAIOA, and the Orange team, and also the winners of the Wooden Spoon, Warlocks. So, well done to them. I would like to thank all our sponsors, without which we would find it harder to have the meeting. So thank you for our sponsors. But a very, very big thank you to Lou Peck and the organising committee, who did an incredible, stellar job in putting together such. Well, all the committee as well. I know some of you are in here, but thank you for pulling together such a stellar programme. It has been truly inspiring, so thank you to the committee. And on that, let's give a big thank you to the speakers and the session chairs. I mean, it takes quite a lot of work, as we know, to pull together a presentation. Not all of us are comfortable standing on stage speaking, but everyone does it, and the session chairs have helped things run really smoothly. So thank you to those people as well. And I just want to maybe finish off with some thank yous to some of the people who maybe are more not at the forefront of things, so not everyone is seeing what they're doing. So thank you to Alistair Horn. I don't know if he's in here, who's been helping update our ALPS socials. He's been back doing a lot of tweeting and so on, so thank you to Alistair. Thank you to the conference hotel staff, they've been great. And a big shout out to our guys in the back corner here from Visual Events, who've been miking us up and making sure that everyone can hear everyone who's on stage. A big thank you to everyone there. We're almost there. I know we want to get to lunch, but I can't finish off without saying a big thank you to the ALPS team. It really is an honour to work with them, and it's a delight working with the team. They are all, each and every one of them, amazing, and they look after us so well, not just at this event, but throughout the year. So thank you to Wayne and his team as well. And then finally, just thank you to you all again. We can't have a conference without you. You make the conference what it is, and you make our community what it is, and everyone in this room is truly amazing, and I honestly do truly believe that. We've had a great time. Lunch is downstairs. Please enjoy lunch, have your safe journeys home, and don't forget, we'll be back in Manchester for our conference next year. So take care, everyone. Bye-bye.